everybody, and welcome to another board game discussion video. For this particular one, I use the term board game extremely loosely because I'll primarily be talking about tabletop RPGs. Why am I going to be talking about that? Well, the reason is essentially because I feel like I've made sort of a mini series of discussion videos that I am colloquially going to refer to as Danny is a fuddy-duddy, because I talked about board games and video games where we have a lot of board games becoming apps and things like that, and it's something I really don't enjoy personally. And then I talked about Kickstarter and miniatures and the appeal of aesthetics and all that kind of stuff. And again, it's something that I know a lot of people really appreciate, but for me, I'm just like, no, give me analog, give me an actual physical board, give me gameplay, give me that kind of stuff. So I wanted to talk today about tabletop RPGs. Because for me, this is really where it all comes back to. And as always, I'm curious what you guys have to think about this. Have you all played any of these types of games? What do you think of them if you have? Do you prefer something that has a little bit more structure? All of that kind of stuff. As always, you guys know I love to hear from you. And again, if you haven't done so already, please take a look at my Facebook and my Twitter pages, because that's where I announce new, all sorts of different stuff. I announce my new videos when I do live streams, when I have contests and giveaways, fun articles, all sorts of cool stuff. So please go and check those out if you have not done so already. But with that, today we're talking about tabletop RPGs. Primarily what I'll be mentioning and the context that I'll be giving this in is essentially so you guys can understand where I'm coming from and why I think this way about certain things. And it's going to be relatively unstructured from my perspective in terms of how I discuss things, but I've got three main games that I wanted to talk to you guys about, and then I'll just sort of wrap up with a few little conclusions. So, like many people, I started off tabletop RPGs with the granddaddy of them all, D&D, Dungeons & Dragons. This particular book is for the 5th edition. I started off with version 3.5, which is probably the one that's the most well known. Now, don't worry if you don't understand what I'm talking about. Suffice it to say, RPGs in general have several things in common. You're talking about building a character from scratch, a full-fledged, this is you in the game character. You have your own stats, you have your equipment, you have your background, your personality, all of these kinds of things, and it's all built into the character. And the entire point of the RPG is the RP, the role playing. You become a different character. You are somebody else. And that's one of the reasons why I was so attracted to these games, is because it essentially allowed me to not be Danny for a little while. And that is extremely appealing. It's extremely appealing for a lot of people. It's nice to just sort of have an escape and be something or someone that you're not, and somebody who's just not like you, and so you can just sort of do something else completely different. The other really major aspect for these types of games is the openness for it. Now, we all have these games like Dragon Age and Mass Effect and even Mad Max, things like that, where we have the open world system, and the idea is that you go around, you do your quest, you find side quests, you can drive around, run around, however you travel, whatever it is that you do, and you go and you pretty much do whatever you want, and then, oh yeah, I'll get to the main quest at some point. Now for me, Morrowind was really the biggest video game that got me into that aspect. My favorite game of all time still is Super Mario RPG, but it is not an open world. Morrowind blew me away. Completely blew me away. But that is neither here nor there. Getting back to D&D, the great things about the tabletop role-playing games is that you are only confined by the imagination of the person in charge, the DM, the GM, whatever it is that they're referred to. And that's why I love them so much. And the fact is that more often than not, you don't have anything physical that manifests what's going on. It's all in the player's minds. You don't have a physical grid with physical miniatures, because it's essentially you say what you want to do and the DM tells you whether or not you can do it. And that's it. Basically, you don't even have to obey the laws of physics sometimes. You just need to obey the laws of your character sheet, and that's pretty much it. For those of you who haven't tried it, D&D 5th edition actually takes a lot of different aspects from other previous edition, and essentially they took all of the really good stuff from previous edition and shoved it into this one. For 3.5, they had very complex characters and just all sorts of different stuff that you had to do in order to actually play. 4th edition, they went the exact opposite way, where they made everything extremely simplistic and sort of modular, like cut and paste type of thing. But the veteran gamers, including myself, didn't really like it because it was frankly boring and we didn't get to do much customization. So 5th edition sort of combined those two together, made things nice and modular and easy to use where it's necessary, but then have that nice customization ability underneath everything as well. So they struck a very good balance, in my opinion. But again, the main point for these games is the fact that you have customization. Everything is in your own mind. You don't have to worry about a physical representation of what's going on. That was one of the issues with 4th edition, is that it pretty much required you to have miniatures and a map. Now, for a lot of people, that's great. You need some kind of a visual. For me, it really does help to an extent. It's nice to be able to move and be like, oh, can I see that guy? What can I do? All that kind of stuff. But just having it there in the DM's mind and just moving through really quickly and having the image in my mind is perfectly fine. And I love that, and I really miss it. I haven't been able to play much. Now, next up, the next game I wanted to talk about is one that you might be familiar with. Star Wars, in this case, Edge of the Empire. Edge of the Empire is the newest of a series of role-playing games based off of Star Wars. There have been a lot of Star Wars RPGs. Edge of the Empire is the newest sort of iteration. It comes to us courtesy of Fantasy Flight, actually, because they have literally all of the Star Wars gaming rights to do. And there have been new source books and all sorts of different adventure paths and all sorts of craziness like that with Edge of the Empire. We also have like Age of Rebellion, we have Force and Destiny, which does a lot with Jedi, just lots and lots of stuff. The obvious appeal for this one is the intellectual property. I love Star Wars. A lot of people love Star Wars. Sci-fi in general is tremendously fun. And it gets us into a world that we're already familiar with because of the Star Wars movies and what few books are still canonical and all that kind of stuff. And so it's a unique experience even compared to D&D, because with D&D it's like, well, it's a fantasy world. Okay, so kind of like Lord of the Rings, I guess. Basically, that's essentially what it is. But with Star Wars, we have so much history and so many features and everything, and D&D itself has its own history. But the thing is, you have to read about it separately, whereas with the Star Wars role-playing game, you already know a lot about it if you've seen the movies and things like that. So it's tremendously fun, and one of the things I particularly like about the Star Wars one is how the game progresses and how you actually do things. In D&D, you roll a d20 and you add some stuff to see if you succeed or fail. In the Star Wars game, you roll a whole bunch of dice and you see how well or poorly you do. You literally have successes and fails. If you have more successes, then you do the thing you are trying to do. So it's a lot more role-playing, acting, and again, imaginative type of thing, where you have some really big possibilities, really big capabilities that you can see in the dice, and it's a lot more about how you describe what you're doing as opposed to simply, I hit the guy for 10 damage. You know, which is not bad, don't get me wrong, but with Edge of the Empire, it's, you know, like, I definitely slide out of the way, and as I do so, I jam my vibroblade in the guy's ribs or whatever. Don't do that, that would hurt. But, you know, if you're fighting somebody, then do it, okay? But that's the kind of thing that I mean, where it's more about the storytelling and it's about how you present yourself, not only as a character, but if you're playing as the GM, as the game master, then what it is that you're going to allow your people to do and all that kind of stuff. So it's absolutely incredible. Amazing storytelling type of thing. Last but not least is probably my ultimate favorite in terms of storytelling, and that is 7th. This particular one is the 2nd edition. This actually came off of Kickstarter a few months ago. I honestly don't remember exactly when, but I was playing this with the 1st edition, and I fell in love with this more than anything else. And the reason simply being because you have a huge emphasis on the storytelling. You have a lot of emphasis on social interactions between the player characters and non-player characters. You even have bonuses that you get for staying in character and behaving as if you were your character and actually saying things. So you can easily roll a die for your charisma to say, I give a rousing speech to the troops. Oh, I got a 15, it's a pretty good speech. Or you can sit there and you can give a rousing speech. and then you get bonuses for it and stuff like that. It's incredible. It's absolutely amazing. And that is what I love about these types of games, is that you can get as into it or as out of it as you want to as a player. It is entirely up to you what you want to do. But 7th Sea I particularly enjoyed simply because of how it encouraged that, and you got the real bonuses for it and things of that nature. With D&D and with Edge of the Empire, yes, you can do that, you can really get into character and you can do those things, but there's no real incentive for it. It doesn't really reward it beyond if the DM or the GM allows you to do something extraordinary just because you described it really well. And it's like, okay, you don't have to roll because that was amazing. And you can do that and stuff. But 7th Sea probably my favorite in that sense. D&D probably the most well known though. But that aside, I have played a lot of tabletop role-playing games. We've got Call of Cthulhu. We've even got the Munchkin, the Munchkin RPG. We've got a Dragon Age based RPG. We've got Doctor Who based RPGs. Got all sorts of different things for all sorts of different franchises. And my next favorite after these three would probably be the Call of Cthulhu, again because of the atmosphere. It's incredible. It takes place in like the 1920s, so you've got the bootlegging and then you've got the Cthulhu mythos on you and that kind of stuff. 7th Sea is sort of like French Revolution era based Europe. So it doesn't actually take place in Europe, but it's something that is Europe equivalent type of thing. So you're looking at that sort of like dueling and, oh, you insult my honor, so whack, stuff like that. That's really what 7th Sea is about. And, sailing and exploring, and that's really what RPGs are about, is the exploration and the acting and just getting into the game. And like I said, the entire point of this video is to give you guys context for what I was talking about earlier. Not only to share my love of these types of games, and on top of that, some of the other ones that came off of them. So for example, Pathfinder, I don't know if you guys can see it, but Pathfinder adventure card game, Rise of the Rune Lords, or the Skulls and something, I don't remember off the top of my head. I also have somewhere over here, if we can find it, the Legend of Drizzt, all of the various D&D based games. So we got Lords of Waterdeep, Legend of Drizzt, Wrath of, is it Ashlon? I don't know how to pronounce the dragon's name. And then we also have Castle Ravenloft. So it's just, we have these things that have been translated from this massive, open, incredible world into something that is a little bit more finite, which is not bad at all. But to give you guys the context for it, this is why I get sort of perturbed when I see games, whether it's on Kickstarter or indie games in general, that don't focus on what you are actually doing as a player. I have been playing games like this with literally zero aesthetics. The only thing I have is a character sheet that says what I am and what I can do, and that is all. Everything else is in my imagination, the imaginations of the other players, and the story and the notes for the GM, the person in charge, and that's it. That is more than enough for me to have an incredible gaming experience. On that note, just very, very briefly as I go out, one of the biggest issues with RPGs in general is the DM, or the GM. Right? If you have a bad game master, if you have a person who doesn't know how to be in charge, who is disorganized, or just isn't into it, like their heart isn't into it and they just don't care, then you are going to have a bad time. Okay? That's just the nature of the beast. If the person who is in charge of the whole thing just doesn't have the oomph for it, then nobody is going to enjoy it. The person in charge isn't going to enjoy it, the people who are playing aren't going to enjoy it, and the idea is that you want to lead the players enough so that they know what needs to be done, but you don't want to constrain them too much either. So it's really a give and take between the players and the GM, and that's one of the greatest things about these types of games. As you're going through and doing campaigns, then you're talking about weeks and weeks or months or even years playing with the same people, working on these same things, meeting these same characters over and over, learning more and more about them, getting them fleshed out, and you learn about the little dark evil secrets and all this kind of thing as you're going to your ultimate goal. And it's just an incredible experience. And honestly, if you guys have not tried it, I highly recommend it. If you want to go technologically advanced, you can do things like play by post, where you play on forums. You can do play by email, where you like just send out your actions and things like that and what you do. All sorts of different stuff like that exists. If you guys are not aware of it, please check out N-World. N-World is like sort of the quintessential area to go to for these types of games, whether you want to just learn about what they are, how they work, or if you want to actually play them online. Then you can find a group, and again, you can do like play by forum post, where you just post and say, I do this action, I roll, and I hit, I don't hit, whatever it happens to be. But with that, thank you guys so very much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope it gave you a little bit of context so that you can understand a little bit better where I've been coming from with my Danny is a Fuddy-Duddy series, and that's really why I don't care about what a game looks like. I care about what a game feels like. And really, this is the reason. It's because of RPGs. But again, please let me know what you guys think about this in the comments below. You guys know I love hearing from you, and particularly on something like this, because this is like the basis for a lot of my mentality when it comes to gaming in general. So I'm really curious what you guys have to say, and I've never really talked about role-playing games, so I would love to just hear you guys' general thoughts about it. But with that, thank you very, very much for watching. Hope that you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time.